Thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and particularly thank Rabbi Rabovsky, as well as thank Dr. Jack Prince for all his efforts in coordinating the Lunch and Learns. One may have thought that it was going to be easier without the lunch, so to speak, but that's not really the case. Lunch is on your own, but we are certainly pleased to provide the learning. Rabbi Rabovsky grew up in Baltimore. Some of us may have known him from years back there. And he received his smicha from Yeshivas Chafetz Chaim, which he attended for quite a number of years, 3 of which were spent in Eretz Yisrael. In addition, he went on to learn at the Torres Chaim Community Kollel in Miami Beach for 3 years. So he had a sense of the Florida communities. He served as the Orthodox Rabbinical Board of Broward and Palm Beach, the ORB, in the position as a kashrut administrator and overseeing kashrut as well as the community eruv. Rabbi Rabovsky has been the Rav of the Young Israel since 1990, and many of us want to appreciate the spiritual guidance and leadership he's given for the entire community. In 2017, Rabbi Rabovsky was kind enough to speak to us on the topic Achdus, a force that can yield the greatest brachot. And he came back in 2019 to speak about understanding Pesach's place in our lives. He's also been an advocate of the Boca Raton Kollel because he's a strong believer in the words of the Mishnah, Marbeh Torah, Marbeh Chayim. The more Torah, the more life. Indeed, today we are privileged to hear some new Torah from him as well. It's indeed an honor and a pleasure for me to introduce Rabbi Rabovsky today as our first Lunch and Learn speaker for 2021, as he shares with us his thoughts on the topic, some H words, haughtiness, humility, and happiness. Rabbi Rabovsky, bevakasha.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a confession. And you're not even wearing a mask, so I don't have the excuse, but I don't recognize you. What is your name, sir?
My name is Kenneth Green, and I currently serve as the chairman of the Education Committee.
Pleasure to meet you. Thank you for offering so many generous words about me. I'd be fascinated to meet such a person. Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to meet you. And a pleasure to be with everybody here today. It is my great schluss. And big yasher koach, of course, to Dr. Prince from afar, and to everybody who's been involved in the program in general and specifically in this one for all the work and coordination. Is it Dr. Green, Rabbi Green, Mr. Green?
Rabbi Green.
I'm sorry?
Rabbi Green.
As Rabbi Green has been mentioning, without the lunch, it's still a lot. It's still work. Still work. So thank you very much for all the work that you have done. 13 years ago, I never would have realized the significance of a story that I heard in our shul as part of a scholar in residence that we had hosting Rabbi Yoshua Wender of Young Israel of Houston. The topic of his presentation was Judaism on one foot. He was in a pool doing water aerobics early in the morning. The pool was empty and he was there first. And it was a very large pool with, Olympic size with lots of lanes that were marked off in the pool. It was a pool for, people that wanted to exercise, and a pool for serious swimmers. Another man came and he starts to do laps. And this other fellow who comes into the pool, and there are 10 lanes in this pool, maybe more. This fellow gets in on the opposite side of Rabbi Wender in exactly the lane that Rabbi Wender is in, and starts swimming. And he's building up speed, and he's really moving. He's coming right at him. And it's like incredulous. I mean, the pool is empty. There are 9 other empty lanes, and he is swimming away in this lane where the rabbi is exercising. He realizes that he's going to have to jump out of the way. This guy's not stopping. He jumps out of the way, and the guy just barrels down, and he avoids the collision. And at the end of this man's routine, I guess he just felt some responsibility to say something to the obvious question of why in the world are you in the lane that there's one person in this pool in one lane. Why in the world are you not in one of the 9 empty lanes? And he looks at Rabbi Wender and he says, I like that lane. That's why he said, I like that lane. This story is a great illustration of a person who sees himself in the world and nobody else. And the first H word that I wanted to talk about is the word haughty, or haughtiness, gava, ego, conceit. And this is a great demonstration of the extreme of this. It's a person who, that's what he sees. He sees himself, and his view of himself eclipses everybody and everything else that's around him. That is the danger of arrogance. That's arrogance in the extreme, but it's a slippery slope. We need to realize that and know that. In our time, and particularly, with COVID, there's a lyric in a secular song that has resonated with me very much. And it goes, it makes me wonder how we will return. Where will we go? What will we do with all we've learned? What have we learned? I know what we must learn. That I'm pretty confident about. We need to learn, if there's an overarching message from what we've experienced in almost a year now, it's learning humility. If COVID is going to inform us about something, it should humble us. And I don't want to belabor it, but there are so many things about life that were constant in our lives. And I don't think in this group today I have any teenagers. I don't think that there's anybody here in their 20s or 30s. Everybody who's part of this group, myself included, has Baruch Hashem been blessed already with many decades of life. And over all these decades, for many of us, not all of us, but for many of us, there's just a lot of things that always have been. They've been constants from the time that we were boys and girls to the present. And then the world, in a sense, stopped, and a lot of those things that we take for granted ceased to be or changed very dramatically, very dramatically. And our assumptions about life, our assumptions about what we have, our assumptions about our power, about where we can go and what we can do and who we can do it with, really have all been cast aside. And so we've had Pesach Siddharim that are radically different from anything we ever knew, and shul that's been radically different, and how many bar mitzvahs and how many chasanas that just are so different from anything that we saw before. And it should humble us. And that's not a bad thing. It comes with struggles and difficulties and challenges, but the lesson of humility is not a bad thing at all. The Pele Yoed says, "Anovahi mida tova deles dichvase." Humility is a positive trait that has no peer. And he goes on and he says, it's the father of Torah and all good qualities. Its friends follow right behind: love and brotherhood and peace and friendship with everybody. An of a humble person doesn't get angry. He gives in. He doesn't demand things. He runs away from honor. He doesn't seek out greatness or social status. He doesn't hold himself high. Now we can understand that anivos is a tremendous asset in terms of beinod l'chavero, between man and man in our relationships one with the other. But the Pele Yoetz also refers to it as the Avat Torah. It's a source of Torah. It's a source of our relationship with Hashem. So how do we understand that? Contrast the man in the swimming pool in Houston, Texas, who insists on going in the one lane that's occupied, with Avram and Sarai, even before their names are changed, when they go into Canaan. And Chazal say that they built inns along the highway, and they fed people, and they provided lodging for travelers. And Chazal say that people would say to them, the food was delicious, the beds were comfortable, how can we thank you? And to that, Avram and Sarai would respond, don't thank me, don't thank us. Thank Hashem. He's the creator of all good things. Thank him. And through that, people began to believe. People began to think about a world that was God-centered. People began to look at a concept of monotheism, of a creator, of a world where people are created in the image of God. A movement of belief began. Now, there was a time, not that long ago, where we were very social with each other, and we were social with other people too. And we invited people to our homes all the time, particularly on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. And we were guests by the table of others as well. All the time we did this. And sometimes, perhaps, I hope, we all had the opportunity maybe to have somebody at the table who maybe didn't know that much about Yiddishkeit. They were newer to it. It was more of a foreign experience to them. They didn't have the education, whether it was from their home or from school. And so we had lots of company. But it didn't happen for us when we hosted our uninitiated neighbors. We had them at our table. We fed them. They were very appreciative. We benched. Maybe we talked about Hashem. Maybe we talked about Judaism. We talked about what Jewish life was about. But I never found myself to be an amazing machine of kirov, of bringing people closer to Hashem. So how come a formula that Avram and Sarai embraced and worked so well for them and they created a movement and, dare I say, a revolution in the world. How come I'm not a revolutionary? How come, a lot of people feel that way? We do it, but it doesn't seem that to work that way. And to answer this, I'll answer it in a very Jewish way with another question. Why didn't Avram and Sarai, when they were asked, or when the person said, thank you very much, why didn't they say, thank Hashem and thank me also? Why did they say just thank Hashem? I mean, after all, she cooked the food and he served it. I mean, is it wrong for them to thank the host and the hostess? The answer is, it's a simple answer. It's a profound answer. The answer is that Avram and Sarai did not see themselves. They basically viewed themselves as invisible. They viewed themselves as messengers of Hashem, so much so that, it's almost like I don't exist. And that's why they succeeded the way they succeeded. That's why their message registered and hit home. It made all the difference in the world. That guy in the swimming pool, see, he only sees himself. He doesn't see any other person. Forget about Hashem. He doesn't see any other person. So he takes up all the room in the room. There's nothing left. He takes it all up. There's nothing left for anybody else. There's nothing left for Hashem. There's nothing left for Hashem's traits. Avram and Sarai are the polar opposite of that. They take up no room. And when the less room I take up, the more room there is for the Borei Olam, for the Creator. The more room there is for godly traits. And Hashem and Avram and Sarai, they were so invisible, and they exuded that feeling that it is Hashem who's the benefactor here. And as you benefited from the meal and the lodging, I'm also a benefactor. I'm really no different than you are. They imparted that message with so much sincerity that the truth of it was undeniable. And that's why they had great impact. There is a that I read about the Stipler, Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky Zatzal. Amazing story that demonstrates what humility can be. Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky was an incredible giant of Torah, person who was immersed in Torah study and helping people, guiding people, answering questions. As Yibara L'chaim Tovim, his son, has done for decades. There was a Rav in Bnei Brak, a young rabbi who befriended the Stipler. And he used to go to him, visit with him, spend time with him. When the Stipler was younger, and he wasn't so famous. And this man became a bit of a Talmud, a bit of a student. When the man's son became 3 years old, the man had the minhag, as many Hasidim do and many in Eretz Yisrael have in general, of doing an upshirin, not cutting the boy's hair till age 3, and then cutting the boy's hair at age 3. He brought his son to the Stipler. And he asked the Stipler to cut some of the hair and give him a bracha. And the Stipler looked at him and he said, the Brisker Rav, when they brought a boy, a 3-year-old boy to him to cut the hair, he said, I'm not a barber. I'm not a barber. I don't do that. That's not for me. So the man said, well, I just meant like maybe one cut. So he relented. He really didn't like it, obviously. He relented. He cut one clip of hair, gave the boy a bracha, and they went on their way. probably to other Rabbonim. A short while later, that man who had the upshirin was blessed to have another simcha. He had a daughter. He was very excited. And he went over to the house of the Stipler to share the good news that he had another simcha, he had another child. And the Stipler, he opens the door, he comes in and tells him, the Stipler says, I'm so glad you came. I'm so glad you came. Besides the good news you want to tell me, I'm so glad you came because I've been agonizing and tormenting myself. Why in the world did I have to say that to you about the brisker Rav who said when they brought a boy at 3 years old to clip the hair, I'm not a barber? You know, why did I have to do that? I mean, obviously it was important to you. I should have obliged. I should have done it with a smile. I shouldn't have done it begrudgingly and repeated that to you. What was the point? And this was what I saw in print. He said, it was my midos ra'os that took over. My bad traits got a hold of me. And that's why I said what I said. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. The humility, the honesty that a humble person has. I'm not enslaved by myself. I can admit my faults, no matter how I may be great in certain ways, but I can see the blemishes also. And I own them and I can admit them. And what happens then? Hashem runs into the room. The godly traits run into the room. And the trait of anivus, of humility, of compassion, of the ability to apologize and say one is sorry. All these beautiful things demonstrated. Humility has a lot of applications, and it's a natural inclination with all of us to try to make sense out of stuff that's happening. And we've certainly had a lot of minutes, morning, noon, and night, to try to make sense out of what we've been experiencing about what's been going around. Sometimes we're successful. Sometimes we're not so successful. Rabbi Eli Monk Zatzal was a noted German Talmud Chacham in the 20th century. He taught very beautifully, an essential component of wisdom is the knowledge that man's failure to understand truth does not make it untrue. Just because I can't understand something doesn't mean it's false or wrong. Sometimes you can understand and sometimes we can't. What are we supposed to do? We should learn from Moshe Rabbeinu. He looks at the bush and it's burning, but it's not being consumed. This is not normal fire. And in the words of Rav Sham Shirafo Hirsch and others, he stood back. I can't understand it. I know I can't understand how it works. I just want it to impact me. Let it impact me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, rewarded him with the manhigos, with the leadership of the Jewish people, the prophecy, and the great schos to lead us out of Mitzrayim, the importance of that, the opportunity of that. So we have to try to understand. We should. But there are times where the truth is beyond us, and we have to say, I don't know, and I don't need to know. And sometimes the honest answer is, how could I even have the audacity to think that I should know? I mean, a person, if I were to walk into an operating room and they're performing heart surgery, I mean, I was going to start, why are you cutting here and why are you doing this and why should I even think that I would begin to fathom what they're doing? I mean, I don't know anything about it. I never learned about it. I never went to school for it. I have no training in it, no orientation in it. So important for us to recognize the fact that the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, is that way. There are many aspects of life that are so intricate, and the calculus behind events and every ripple effect within those events is determined by factors that are really beyond us. And that reality, that it is beyond me, can free me from a lot of frustration. The frustration sometimes from needing to know. I don't need to know. There are times where we have to disagree on issues, but it's so important for us to not make it personal. It should not be a personal thing. It should be an issue. COVID, in and of itself, one of the great tests of COVID is that it's brought about a lot of principle stands and a lot of opinions and a lot of opinionated people. Humility does not say that people shouldn't have opinions. A humble person will have opinions. A humble person should be concerned. A humble person has a right and a responsibility to be principled. That's all true. But we have to make sure that it's the issue and it's not personal and it never becomes personal. Every human being is much bigger than his or her views on a particular issue. And even if somebody is saying something and advocating something that I know is quantifiably wrong, that does not define this person. And it's important for us to have that balance. The Kli Yakar says that when we were on the journey to Har Sinai, there was still a separation between us. We were not unified. The Torah tells us, Vayichan Sham Bahar Neged Ahar, that Klal Yisrael encamped in the singular by Har Sinai. It indicated K'ish echad b'lev echad, there was a unity amongst Klal Yisrael. Says the Kli Yakar, there was a progression to that. When we were on the march, we didn't have that unity. What happened? An astounding thing happened, says the Kli Yakar. It's an amazing comment. The Kli Yakar says we were walking towards Har Sinai with this expectation of destiny, that now we are going to see the place which is the destiny of mankind, the giving of the Torah. This is what the world was created for. And we're filled with such a sense of expectation. When we saw the mountain that Hashem chose, we were astounded. We thought we were going to see Everest. We thought we were going to see something majestic. And instead, we saw something that was average. Har Sinai was small. And when we saw that, we realized a new truth, that that's what Hashem loves. This moment, this destiny for the world, the giving of the Torah, it's got to be on the mountain that's small. That's what Hashem loves. That's what Hashem celebrates. The words of the Kli Yakar, Ozro Shakadosh Baruch Hu Bocher Ba'anovim. They saw that Hashem chooses the humble ones. Hashem wants the humble mountain. Hashem wants humble people, and that transform them into humble people. And humble people are people who are together. They're people that love each other and care about each other. And they are people, and that leads us to the next H. They're happy people. They are happy. Happiness is not something that comes automatically. It is a work and it requires a focus. Humility helps us, but we still have to focus in on it. Think about Yosef in jail. In jail for a crime he never committed, framed by Potiphar's wife. Yosef, the Torah tells us he saw the Sarah Mashkim and the Sarah Ophim, and they looked depressed and they looked sad. And he says, "What's up? What's wrong?" I mean, it's an unbelievable thing that Yosef cares about. He sees their deportment and he reacts to it. And he wants to help them. I mean, imagine how much misery Yosef was experiencing in that circumstance. He's got every reason to be bitter, and he's got every reason to be self-absorbed. But you see that that's not the case. He had the ability in those moments of misery, horrible experience personally, to be able to see outside himself. And that speaks to his humility. That speaks to the sense of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that was around him. And that's also his focus on my purpose in life is to do. My purpose in life is to help people, to be a Baal Chesed, to emulate Hashem's ways in any way that I can, even in this miserable place. It's a miserable place, but it's not God forsaken. Hashem is here too. And my role is to emulate him. I want to share with you a very powerful story that I just heard. Perhaps there are some here today who even know the individuals involved. It's possible. I heard the story from my friend, Rabbi Binyamin Luban, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Torah Chaim in North Miami Beach. And it was a story about his parents. Rabbi Luban's father was Rabbi Marvin Luban, who was the rabbi of the Young Israel of Forest Hills. Rabbi Luban's mother was diagnosed with cancer, lo aleinu, in her 50s. She passed away. She was 64 years old. Rabbi Binyamin Luban said, I remember sitting at her levaya and hearing my father eulogize my mother. And my father said in the eulogy, this last year of life was our happiest year. It was our best year. After the funeral, he went to his father and he said, I can't fathom it. I can't understand it. I mean, I know what you went through. I know all the chemo and all the trips to the doctor and the hospital and how sick mom was. And your best year? And his father looked at him and his father said, your mother and I knew that the mountain was very steep and very likely this was going to be the end. We made a resolution that we were going to have a happy time together. And we did. You see, what a person is able to do with focus. We can be, you don't feel good. We're on our way to a doctor's office. But if the sky is blue, I'm going to notice it. I'm going to notice the blue sky. And it's going to register. And it's going to make me feel good. And we're 97% of what's going on around us right now is difficult and painful and scary, but 3% is positive. I'm not going to ignore the 3%. The power that a person can have to focus, the power to keep one's eyes on the prize. I think I want to make this point. I was speaking to a group of young parents a couple of days ago. I think it's very important for everybody of every age. In our quest for this H, for happiness, I think there's nothing better to harness than the laws of Lashon Hara. To try to do everything we can do to keep our houses Lashon Hara free. Lashon Hara is very negative and very toxic. It breeds a lot of insecurity in people, and especially in children and in grandchildren. Talk in the house should be positive. There are numerous wonderful Jewish men and Jewish women today who will tell you, if they trust you and they can be honest with you, they will tell you that they hate Shabbos. They hate it. And you look at them, and these are people who grew up with Shabbos. They grew up with Shabbos. They hate it. Why do you hate it? Because Shabbos was horrible. What was horrible? Shabbos is beautiful. All we did was sit around the table and complain about people.
Oh my
That's all
God.
that ever happened at our Shabbos table. The complaining about, everything. They complain about the shul. They complain about the rabbi. They complain about the school. They complain about the Rebbe. They complain about the neighbors. They complain about the politician. It's all negative talk. And after a while, it's just painful. I kid you not. We could fill a big room, more than one, with such men and women today that will tell you they're scarred from that kind of upbringing. When I was a younger person, a student in a yeshiva in Rochester, New York, had the opportunity to have a Shabbos Suda at the home of Rabbi and Rebbitzin Davidowitz, Rosh Yeshiva and Rebbitzin of the yeshiva. And I'll never forget the story that I heard from Rebbitzin Davidowitz. Rochester at that time had a community day school. It was not an Orthodox school. It was a community non-denominational school. And there was a faction of Orthodox kids that went to the school, but I don't think they were even the majority. And the teachers were, hodgepodge from all kinds of backgrounds and all. And I mean, the bottom line is that the Judaics were not necessarily being taught by mitzvah observant people. They had young children at the time that went to the school. So she said, this was sometime after Sukkot, we had this meal on a Shabbos. She said, she said, I want you to know, the kids were not at the table. Kids were asleep, little kids. So she says, my girls were getting ready to go to the yeshiva for Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah night, to daven. And we're on our way to the car, to get in the car, to drive to the yeshiva, to start Rosh Hashanah. And then one of them says, I got to run back inside. I forgot. So Mrs. Davidowitz said, what'd you forget? She said, I forgot my running shoes. Your running shoes? We learned in school that on Rosh Hashanah, you're not supposed to wear your regular shoes. You're not supposed to wear shoes that are made out of leather. You're supposed to wear, not supposed to wear those shoes.
I know.
So Mrs. Davidowitz told us that she told her daughter, she said, different people have different customs about that. There's different customs. Our custom is to wear the regular shoes on Rosh Hashanah. That's what we do. So it's okay. It's okay. Your teacher, that's a different custom, but our custom is to do that. She said to us, sitting at the table, she said, I would never criticize, I would never correct a teacher to a child like that. I deal with it in my own way, private way, constructive way, with the school, with the teacher, but never, the teacher is wrong. This teacher doesn't know what he or she's talking about. They're all mixed up with Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. They don't understand. No. And it was so illustrative to me. If we have close to us people who are negative, I think the best thing we can do, it's very hard to change people. And sometimes it's the best strategy is not to try to change people, but not to be changed by them. We have to hold on to ourselves and maintain our own balance and reaffirm our own positive outlook and our own resistance to lashon hara and different things that are toxic and are negative. And by doing that, we could have the best influence, I think. We can have the best influence. Just, I guess, to close, Rav Chaim Volozhiner was the outstanding student of the Vilna Gaon, once came to the Vilna Gaon and said, how in the world is Mashiach going to come? So many great people lived in the world and Mashiach didn't come, and now every generation is so much less than the previous one. How can Mashiach come to pathetic generations? You imagine Rav Chaim Volozhin said that, what would he say about us? But the question is all the more powerful today. The Vilna Gaon said, It's a good question, but you don't have to worry about that question. You don't have to worry about it. That question was dealt with already by Chazal. They dealt with it. Don't worry. And a back and forth and a back and forth. So the Vilna Gaon said in the first page of Tana Debei Elio, excuse me, that in the first page of Tana Debei Elio, that question is dealt with. They looked at the first page of Tana Debei Elio. They don't see any discussion about Mashiach. What in the world is Rebbe talking about? So the Vilna Gaon says, look at what it says in Tana Debei Elio. It talks about the attributes of God. And it mentions this attribute of Hashem is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Sameach B'chelko. He's happy with his lot, right? We say in Pirkei Avos, right? Ezeo Asher Sameach B'chelko. Who's a rich person? Somebody who's happy with what he has. So the Vilna Gaon says, I understand that's a lofty thing for a person. Yeah. What kind of praise is that for Hashem? Sameach B'chelko? What's his chelek? What's his poor? He has everything. He created everything. He owns everything. He's the Ribon Kol Olamim, the master of the universe. What do you mean he's content with what he's got? When it says that Hashem is content with what he's got, it means that Hashem is content with his people. It means that he derives pleasure from Klal Yisrael. He derives pleasure from us when we are lofty and great. He derives pleasure from the great people of the past and the great men and women of the present and whoever we are and whatever we are. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ready to bring Mashiach to a generation that serves him on their level, facing their challenges, doing the best they can, rejoicing in their hard work. The same way that Hashem loved the Avos and the Imos and the Dordeya and the Kohanim and the Beis HaMikdash and the Gaonim and the Rishonim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us too. And what can give us a greater sense of happiness and what can humble us more than that truth and that reality? So let's realize haughtiness takes all the air out of the room. It takes HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of the room, and anything that I do that borders on that, I got to try to distance myself from it. We should be so humbled by what we have experienced, particularly in this last almost year, and we should be humble because of it. And that should enable us to be able to go forward together and be patient and be forgiving and keep ourselves out of conflicts. And if Hashem is giving us tests and keeping us from each other, he certainly wants us to show him there's so many disappointments, so many social connections that aren't happening because of the situation. If it really matters, then we have to show Hashem it really matters to us and we really miss it and we really want it. And we want to be with other people. And we want to be with other people, not in a toxic way. We want to be with other people in a loving way and a caring way. And we can show that in the ways that we are connecting right now. And when we do that, and we have that focus, we'll find ourselves seeing the blue sky and appreciating what we do have, and that newfound sense of humility and that rekindled sense of happiness is something that's going to enable us to be able to not only endure, but actually grow. And that growth, Be'ezras Hashem, should be a great schus for ourselves, our families, and Kol Beis Yisrael. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be able to be with you, be able to grow together, and be able to share in the simcha and the joy and the happiness that we always have when we explore Hashem's rich Torah and enable it to be able to enrich our lives.
Thank you, Rabbi Rabovsky, for your beautiful remarks. Anyone want to wish a good Chodesh to Rabbi Rabovsky
Of course,
today
all of
or
us.
others?